Well, hello, everyone. I'm sure it's in some parts of the country quite dreary and snowy today, and in other parts, those of us in the dreary, snowy places are very jealous of your sunshine and good fortune, but happy February and almost Valentine's Day. I'm very excited, and I know Amelia is as well, to present some long-awaited updates for you today. And I'm going to forewarn you by saying there is a lot of content. There's a lot of stuff that we have to talk about, a lot of new things going on at USBC. And so I'm going to try to do as much as I can in sort of outline version while also referring you to other places, other documents where you can dive deeper, perhaps after today, because I know 2 hours on a webinar is already going to be quite a lot. So I'll point out a few different places where you can go for further detail later on, and we'll make sure to put quick links to those handouts or those materials on the webinar page when we post the recording. So just a forewarning that I'll be flying through some things, but we'll make sure to give you more detail. So first off, just wanted to make a couple of very quick updates just from Headquarters Central here. One, just noting that we have added some new folks to the USBC team this fall and winter, and wanted to highlight that we do have a web page now at usbreastfeeding.org/staff where you can see all 8 members of the team who are now employees, as well as our individual specialist that does our meetings management, meeting planning. And there's bios and photos there so that you have a sense of who you're talking to or emailing with over here at USBC. And then also, of course, we continue to have some outsourced or consulting services, which I've listed several of them here. And I know that over time I've talked with some of you about some of these specifics as your coalitions have gone through looking for these types of services, and we're always happy and willing to share our experiences from the different services or vendors that we use. So just some updates from our infrastructure internally. I also want to give a very quick update about the lead up and the results of the Welcome Congress event that we had in January. As you know, the 114th Congress has just taken its seats last month, and we did some new innovative ways to reach out to our audiences in preparation for that, including having our second virtual town hall meeting in December. And we had 56 attendees this time, both online, audio, and chat, and 4 fabulous speakers that you can see here. And we were very happy to get some feedback from folks on all these mechanisms about what's working well with breastfeeding advocacy and what was especially important for the new Congress to consider and what we most want and need them to do in the new session. So thank you to everybody who participated that way or also on social media during that week. We also had our very first ever National Lobbyist Networking Call. We've been building our network of folks, both from our national member organizations and a number of different partner organizations, and we had 26 attendees for this first of its kind call, and especially had a similar conversation with conversations sparked by some initial speakers talking about their organization's top priorities around breastfeeding for the new session. We also did some discussion and early strategizing about, given the climate in Washington and the composition of the new Congress, how we planned to change messaging and framing, and what types of strategies we might pursue in the new Congress. So this was, again, an inaugural session, but something that we're planning and wanting to continue as at least a quarterly event where we get folks together to coordinate around the national agenda. So all of that led up to our Welcome Congress petition note. We took the feedback that we'd received from those 2 different events and formed asks for congressional action around communities, healthcare, and employment areas. With our partner Moms Rising, we had over 15,000 signatures on this welcome note this time, so that was fabulous. And I know many of you are aware that we, in addition to distributing that welcome note to Congress on the delivery day, we also started an inaugural state fact sheet for all 50 states that included the Healthy People objectives broken down state by state, with the data, some information about the federally funded breastfeeding project. So we were telling the Congress people what was going on with their $8 million for breastfeeding in their state specifically, and also the elevator speech blurbs that we asked you, the state coalitions, to send. So thank you to everyone who did send those. These kits were dropped off to every single congressional office. If not on the day, on January 22nd, they were delivered the following week. So we've hit every single congressperson, and every single one got a state fact sheet with that information. So I'll show you in just a second. Here's the link to the Welcome Congress page, and I know many of you are waiting with bated breath. We are posting both a PDF and a Word version of all of the state fact sheets. So shortly after the call this afternoon, those links will be active on that page. I know we're loading a few different things there, but that will be available to you so that you can both see the version that was used this time, and then you could also take the Word version and copy and paste it out should you want to use that fact sheet in your own state or with your own meetings in the future. So this is just the gifts that were in the package this time. We asked them to make change for our nation's families, and they got this little fanny pack change holder with a $1 info card and some wooden coins with the breastfeeding family symbol on it. So thanks again to everybody for participation in that. It was a fabulous event, and thanks, of course, especially to our delivery folks. We did have a good crew of volunteers who helped to do the deliveries on the day. Also wanted to mention, in addition to the national networking lobbyist call, we are going to be starting up a state version of this as well. The USBC Advocacy and Public Policy Committee is very excited about this, and we also want to try to do these quarterly. So we'll be having the first one this spring, and the intention is that each time we'll focus on a slightly different legislative and policy topic. So do watch for this. It may be that depending on what the priorities are in your state or what types of legislation you have, you may not feel it's necessary to be on every single one, but watch for what the topic is, and do join us and share with others in your state. We will, and we'll talk about this in a little bit with the website, every state coalition will be identifying key advocacy contacts so that we make sure that we're especially grabbing those folks when we promote these calls. And then you'll also be identifying key media contacts, I know one or more, where you'd like to refer opportunities for media response in the future. So two sides of the same coin there. So before we go further, I want to just refer here back to the Power Tools webinar that we had, I believe that was in September, because for many of you know, we launched a new strategic framework for USBC in August. And on that September Power Tools webinar, we did a deeper dive into what this lovely wheel symbol means and all of the components therein. So I'm not going to recap all of that. Again, I would refer you back to that webinar recording, but what I will talk about today is the next step that we took around creating an implementation plan for this. And again, the implementation plan has a lot of depth to it as well. Just by way of a bit of background, we used a template from an organization called the Bridgespan Group, which is one of the US-based organizations that does collective impact type of work. And so this link here is to that actual toolkit. It includes some different tools and resources that can be used around planning. So I encourage folks to check that toolkit out. Might be of interest for your coalition. And then here, this is just a screenshot of the main tool that we've been using called the Initiative Overview. Again, there's more pieces in this toolkit, including a strategic communications plan and some other components that we're using, but this is the base of the implementation plan for us. And we will be posting a full version of the whole shebang in the coalition section of the old and the new website, so that if you'd like to, again, take a deeper dive into what all of this is, look at it as a possible model for your coalition, it will be there for you. I'm just going to go over some of the highlights of it today, and again, encourage you to go deeper at a later time. So first I'll talk just briefly about Goal 1, which again is being the national collective voice for breastfeeding. This goal is in alignment with the 5 sections of the Surgeon General's call to action. You can see the objectives 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. do match up with the sections of the call to action, but it leaves the specific implementation strategies or the activities to be defined by the participants in USBC's collaborative work. So what does that mean in real life? There are several areas where USBC is funded to steward collaborative work. We've been using that term steward in some very specific ways because that can really vary depending upon what the topic area is. And stewardship is perhaps a bit more apt for collaborative work. So those areas where we're already funded, those are already plugged into our implementation plan, and they're especially likely to be areas that cross sectors or where there's a particular niche for USBC's involvement. For example, if the topic area really needs the involvement of you guys, the coalitions, then there's a greater likelihood that we might be stewarding in that area so that we can better involve all of you through our existing strong ties that we have. The rest of the section of Goal 1 of the Strategic Implementation Plan is right now listed as to be determined because we have this new constellation model that you'll be hearing about from Amelia where collaborative groups can form and organically find stewards and funded capacity around those other topic areas. And as they do, again, the work is defined by the participants. As they do form, then their activities will be plugged into the plan at a later time. So there's a lot I could say about what the USBC funded areas are, but I'm going to fly through these. And again, all these slides will be available on the website, but just to give you a taste of what the specific funding areas are. We have a couple of cooperative agreement sources of funding through CDC, the Innovative Partnerships for Addressing Obesity you've heard about before, and it includes specifically areas of work around professional and peer support and also worksite compliance with the federal and state laws. We also have a body of work around continuity of care, and as the CDC reps just told us, the NICHQ Bedside Beginnings project is wrapping up very soon, but the NATO project is ramping up, and so much of our work that we were able to do with all of you around community partnerships in NICHQ is able to be transitioned and transferred those learnings and resources that we've been able to find out in the communities are transitioning over into work with NATO, and we're helping to engage with their 70 or 64 grantees, I think it is, to provide training and technical assistance to those folks, and also engaging with the National Breastfeeding Public Health Partners Group through the NATO partnership as well. Then around the continuity of care piece as well, you'll remember that we had a community advisory committee of national member organizations that formed under the NICHQ partnership. And we are continuing to convene some incubation conversations, which you'll hear about again in a bit, around continuity of care with national partners wanting to continue on this learning and community of practice that has begun under NICHQ and to move that forward into the new Constellation model that USBC is housing. And another component of continuity of care that's funded by our CDC partnerships is this building a national integrated web-based resource directory. You may have heard Larry mention this on his last call with us before he retired from CDC in November, but he was calling it the Yelp for breastfeeding, and yes, it is true. What Larry was talking about is going to become a real thing this year, and you might call it a Yelp for breastfeeding, you might call it a resource directory, but ultimately it will be a central hub that mothers can use to find resources. And again, it will be both a web-based resource as well as a mobile app. So it will have both of those components as Yelp does. And then third component of our funded work is around public health infrastructure. Again, this is the source for that resource directory tool, as well as our capacity building assistance for the state, territorial, local, and tribal breastfeeding coalitions. And then finally, our Kellogg grant. As you know, we have had our first grant that is now coming to an end just next month, and that focused around building our capacity to support the coalitions as well as the exploration of collective impact that has now borne fruit into our strategic framework and constellation model. We are working on a second grant that would be for another 3-year period that would support continued implementation and continuation of all of this work and supports that we've been able to provide for the field. So again, there's a lot more that we could say about these funded areas. I've just glossed over high-level topic areas, but I do encourage you especially to look at our 2014 annual report. And in particular, there is a page on constellations in progress that goes into some more detail on some of these funded areas of work. And of course, there will be much more to come on the new communications tools that we'll have with the new website. So stay tuned for more, but that's the broad brush around Goal 1. Goal 2, I can also do a light touch on because this is going to sound familiar. This is the goal around our organizational vitality that seeks to ensure that we are sustainable and effective as an organization, hold close to our values, and acknowledge the critical importance of relationships in coalition work. And it has specifics that I won't go into all the details of here, but again, you can see the slides in the implementation plan. There is a strong focus around optimizing our outreach and engagement with our existing members and partners, also with coalitions and grassroots voices, and especially this piece around increasing coalition and grassroots participation and ownership in the work of USBC. And you're going to see several things that are part of bringing that into being with our new structures and systems that we'll talk about today. 2.2 is around governance and management, so best practices both for our board, for our governance, as well as for the staff team. 2.3, you can see here the definitions of our new first ever for USBC core values. So again, I won't read these out, but there's greater depth within the plan about what does each of these mean. For example, under the integrity value, USBC has just created its very first code of ethics and a formalized ethics committee with a policy and procedure to guide the work of the board and the staff. And so that's just one of the ways that that particular component of the plan is being lived out in our actual day-to-day lives. And then 2.4, it's the money goal around our long-term financial resilience, and you can see that we continue to pursue a variety of different types of funding sources, and that, of course, is critical to make sure that we maintain sustainable focus of our budget, as well as long-term resilience around our public charity status. So goal 3, as we've talked about before, it's no accident that this one is at the bottom because it's the foundation of our collaborative work to support the field. And I'm not going to say much more about this here because Amelia will be especially diving into what goal 3 is all about when she speaks in a little bit. And instead, I'm going to skip to goal 4, which is the goal around creating and modeling a culture of inclusion, diversity, and equity for USBC. And I would call your attention to the fact that there's 3 objectives here. 4.1 especially links to goal 1 of the plan, 4.2 to goal 2, and 4.3 to goal 3. So just to highlight what that means, 4.1, integrating equity at the core of all of our collaborative work, that plays out especially in our Constellation Formation Pathway. So as I said, under Goal 1, collaborative work or constellations will be able to form on all different types of topic areas, and it is part of the pathway through which that collaborative work proceeds that there are different tools and different resources around, especially the stakeholder engagement, the analysis of equity considerations in planning and strategy, and more that Amelia will talk about with the pathway tool. That is how this comes to life in the plan. Under 4.2, this is, again, linking up to the organizational reliance or resilience goal. And this particular objective especially focuses around the internals of USBC, identifying our priorities around our board, staff, and membership, and how we are really allocating our resources and taking action on our diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. And CRASH is the acronym for our committee that is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion within USBC. And so again here, the CRASH Recommendation Implementation Plan, this is a document and some work that is currently in progress with that committee, and as it is finalized, it will have additional details that get filled into the plan. So again, we do have a web page on this, and I know some of you have heard about it a little bit with our webinars this fall and winter, but you'll be hearing more about what does this all mean in the coming months, as well as with the continued work with our racial equity consultants. And then lastly, 4.3 is the goal around building a welcoming experience for our engagement with our collaborative work. And it has initiatives underneath it that align with each of the objectives under Goal 3, advocacy and policy, public will and funding, and so on. So again, I invite you to go dive deeper into the plan to see a little bit more about how that lives out. But I want to make sure we have enough time to get really farther into the new website, and especially the highlights that are specific to state and territory coalitions and more today. So without further ado, I'm going to start with a bit of boringness just to orient everybody to some of the things I'm going to talk about in a moment by talking about 3 key terms. So it's really important that we all are on the same page about these 3 different things and what they mean. So first, there is an individual profile, and I want you to think about profiles. You'll see that I've put in parentheses underneath the individual and the group profiles display window. I want you to think about a profile as this is a display window in a store where you are showing off your best attributes, whether it's about you as an individual or about your group, which for this audience would be your coalition. So your profile is your display window. Everybody comes into the site with an individual profile. You have to have one. You can only log into the site as an individual. So that's your key user account is set up tied to an individual profile. That's all about you, Jane Doe, the individual. Some individuals will also have group admin rights over a group profile. And so that would mean that that person can update the group's profile. So all of the state coalitions are being set up with group profiles, and other organizations will be able to as well. And there will be individuals who have specific rights to change those groups' profiles. And then the third component, some other individuals may also have community administration rights. And so what's a community, Megan? A community, I want you to think about in the sense of a place. It is a place that you go within the site to interact with other people, to work, to play, to network, to share. It's a place that you're going to go in the site. So again, profile is like a display window. Community is like a place to interact and engage and talk with people and work with people. So again, everybody's got to have an individual profile. Everybody comes in as an individual. Not everybody has to have administration rights over group profiles or communities, but some of you, many of you, probably will. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that would look like if you are an administrator of one of those things. But first, what's in your individual profile? Your contact information, obviously, and I'm going to show you that you can set preferences for what's publicly displayed on something called your My Page or your public profile. You can have a brief bio. There's some demographic information that we're collecting, again, as part of our equity, diversity, and inclusion goals. You'll have a space to talk select different areas of expertise in breastfeeding, as well as a place where it will display the memberships in certain communities. Again, community in the site is a place that you can go to interact with certain folks. So on your individual profile, you'll be able to easily see what communities am I a part of right now. So here's this is a back-end view of an individual profile when you're editing it. You can see in this view there the person is working on their areas of expertise in breastfeeding, and you can select multiples of those. I'm also going to show you as another view here. This is my page. Currently, this is the public view of what it would look like, and you can see it's got my key contact information. You can also see down here where it has this little star and says hidden, because I'm looking at this from my own view, it's showing me what things I have hidden. So you can see my mobile phone's hidden, my time zone, and my personal website, because I don't have one. Those things are hidden. So you have control to tell the My Page whether or not to display any of this information about you. You could turn it all off, you could turn it all on, but you will have the capacity to manage those aspects of your My Page. And here's where you do that with your My Page visibility settings. And you show, or you can select whether you want it to show or hide these different types of settings. There's a lot more that we could say about individual profiles, but again, so much to talk about, so we want to move on, but that's just a touch of individual profiles. But I want to move on to group profiles, because this is the meat of a lot of activity for coalitions. So first of all, who is going to have a group profile? And there's really two phases to this. Phase one is the groups that are set up with a profile for pre-go live updates. And pre-go live means these groups are going to have profiles in the site, they already do, and you will be allowed access in to update them before the site goes live on usbreastfeeding.org. So pre-go live, we've got the USBC member organizations and the state and territorial breastfeeding coalitions have their profile set up, and we're going to tell you and show you how to go in and update those. You don't have to update it before we go live, but it's an option and a courtesy that we wanted to extend to everybody to try to put in as much content as we can before we go live to the public on the US breastfeeding domain. So then in phase two, these other types of organizations will be able to create their group profile after the go live date. So that could be any type of other partner organizations with activity or interest in breastfeeding. Could be national, state, local, doesn't matter. But any other organizations will have the ability to do this if they would like to, as well as any other breastfeeding coalitions. I know there's many breastfeeding coalitions out there. We had to start somewhere, so we've set up the state and territorial folks because we have your data and have worked with you the longest, but then it will be open to all other types of coalitions after we go live to set up group profiles as well. So what's in your group profile? You're going to have organizational contact information, especially phone, email, website is important. It's not so critical if you don't have a physical address. Don't worry about it. But phone, email, website, especially key, and I'll show you why in a second. Membership demographics, you'll leave this part blank if you are not a membership-based organization or you don't have the data, but it is, again, a priority of our equity goals to be tracking demographic information. Engagement levels, which is where you tell us your coalition's interest level and activity level on different breastfeeding topic areas. So Amelia is going to talk a little more about that. And then activity descriptions for what's the Surgeon General's call to action directory, or we've called it just the action directory for short. So just a few screenshots to show you what this looks like. This is the editing view of a group profile around racial, ethnic, demographic information. You can see if your organization has members, we would ask you to fill in some data. If you know it, if you don't know it, you would, or if you don't track it, you would just skip this part. But then we also ask if your organization has other activities around diversity and equity. So that will be a really helpful resource for our network. Here is what the engagement levels look like on the back end, and you can see there's all different topic areas, again, aligned with the Surgeon General's call to action, and you'll tell us whether your coalition is core, involved, supportive, or peripheral on each different topic area, and there's definitions of what that means, but this is what it will look like when you're doing that selection. And then here's what it looks like when you're updating your action directory profile. So you would have spaces for each of the different Surgeon General's actions to type or paste in a paragraph, preferably no more than 2 or 3 sentences, about what your coalition is doing in each of these action areas. And then these are going to populate onto public action directory pages. So I'm going to show you one of those in just a moment. So this is the back end. Again, this is editing it in your profile. You would put in text into the big box and links if there is a particular supporting link to your website or your blog or whatever that might be. A publication, you could put the supporting link there as well. And then on the public side, on the website, there would be a page like this for every single action. And so this is the top half of the page. I have to show you in 2 parts. This is Action 9, Education and Training for All Health Professionals. And you can see at the top it's got a table of contents that drops quick links down to the national and state activities below. And it also has the implementation strategies from the call to action itself. And then in the bottom section, it will have a section for the national activities. And you can see here, this is actual data that's pulling out of a couple of our member organizations' profiles. And here's where the phone, email, website is particularly key. You don't want to have these fields be blank. And so all of this will immediately populate out when you put data into your profile. It's going to spit out onto those action pages. If you put in data for Action 3, it will spit out on the website on the Action 3 page. So there will be a section for the national activities, and then there will be a section for state and community activities, so that everything going on, in this case, around Action 9, is aggregated in one place on the site. And again, publicly viewable. So it's a really great way to promote and share information about what all sorts of organizations are doing, coalitions and national organizations, and all across the board. So the third piece that I want to talk about then, I apologize for rushing through, but there's a lot more to say about communities as well. So remember, the communities, unlike the profiles, which was just the display window, the communities is the place. The interactive place. Think of a commons in the middle of a square where you can go and interact with all sorts of people. So this is a screenshot of what the community's homepage is, where one would go and begin to dive into the different types of communities available to you. A community, again, is a place, but there can be multiple different types of communities. So members-only communities, those are communities that are especially for internal USBC infrastructure pieces, such as our board or our committees that work on the operations of USBC. There will be a type called learning communities, which will be open to all and sundry who are interested in particular topic areas. So there will be learning communities, again, around each of the different 20 areas of the Surgeon General's call to action. So if you're particularly interested in, Actions 5, 7, and 9, you can go in and go right into those learning communities and immediately be connecting with people who are also interested in that area or actively working in that area. Learning communities will then form further down the line into constellation spaces, and Amelia will be talking more about what that means for specific groups of partners that have moved further down a pathway towards collaboration. This area also includes space for USBC membership meeting attendees, which makes it more accessible so that guests and visitors who come to our meetings can get in. If we had put the membership meeting section under members only, then when we have guests and visitors, they wouldn't be able to get into there. So that's why the meeting attendee sections will be under Constellation. And then finally, the two especially critical for this call today, the coalition section and the coalition leader section. And so under the coalition section, there is an initial community space for every single state and territory coalition, and others can be created. We'll talk about that. And then coalition leader areas for different types of coalition leader roles, such as chairs or treasurers or media contacts, whatever that may be. So I'm going to show you a few screenshots here of the types of tools that are available in communities. This, first of all, is a fake community landing page. So you can see this is what you would come to when you first come into the community. It's got its calendar, upcoming week up here. It's got a forum here. A forum is essentially a listserv, and it's got one particular thread going on here. It's got a file library. It's got some blogs down here that are feeding in. And then over here on the side, you can see there's a poll going on, and there's a section for links where you could put any types of links that you want to particularly highlight for your community members. Oops. I'm going to erase my drawings here. So that's the landing page. This is a view inside a forum where there's conversation happening, and you can see there's a couple of different posts here. You can reply to a post. You can quote a post. And also you can subscribe, and I'll show you in just a second what the subscription options look like for a forum. So, and there's a lot here, but wanted to give you a sense of the depth of options, because there will be, of course, many, many new ways to connect with people in this new site. And so we don't want you to join the site and be immediately overwhelmed with email, right? So you can set your forum subscription options in whatever way you would like for each type of discussion that you join. You can get immediate emails every single time somebody says something. You get an email. That's the most volume, all the way down to, I want to get a summary digest once a day, just with the first 100 words. You can set whether you want links or attachments. Lot of possibility here to make sure that you're not overwhelmed by the traffic, that you can get the most value out of being part of a discussion forum, as well as the level of notification that you want when the conversation is proceeding or continuing. So next, I'll just show you this quickly is what a file library would look like. And you can see there's a couple of different documents that have been placed in here. You can see they were updated last by me. There's a photo of me, the uploader. They've got some notations about what kind of document they are, when they were last updated, and so on. So lots of new features there to help differentiate between files. And then here's what it looks like when you click into a specific file. You can both download it or email it. You can also find the link to it if you want to share it with somebody else. It tells you the number of times that it's been downloaded, their statistics. You can also rate somebody else's file, all sorts of features if you would like to do things like that within your coalition community. You could have contests about rating your submissions or files. So lots of new features there to see. And then here, what I've shown here, this is actually a blog that's being rolled up onto the community landing page, but I wanted to show you here, this is actually a blog that is not part of this community. This blog is being pulled in. It's the Weekly Wednesday Wire archives being pulled in from the larger site. And so that's something that you can do in your coalition community. If you want to, in your Idaho State Coalition community, pull in the general Coalition's Learning Connection blog as a way to put some nice content in front of your members when they log in, you can do that. You can also have your very own Idaho State Coalition blog, which should you choose to do that, and have your own content. But lots of flexibility and opportunity there to use blog tools in some different ways, whether it's for opinion type writing or whether it's for just posting key announcements in a new way. Different ways that we can use blog tools. Community calendars, you can see, we saw on the landing page how it was showing the upcoming events in particular fashion. This is a way that we're showing a detailed list of upcoming events. And then, whoops. Let's see. Okay, so those were some key features of the community tools. Now I want to talk to you about what are the options for using your coalition community. As I said, there is, for the pre-go live period, we have set up a default community for every single state coalition right now. And you can choose to use that community in a few different ways. You could have that community exist in the site and be open to your membership or your network if you don't have formal members. And that would mean that all individual site users that come in can see and request to join it, and your community administrators would then manage those join requests. They could accept the people in. And then that would be more of an open type community. If you're not really sure you're ready to do that yet, or you have that type of functionality in another place right now, another thing that you could do is use the community for your board or your leadership team, and that would mean it would become a restricted community where only folks who are members of it could see it. It wouldn't be viewable by anybody coming into the USBC site. So in that option, the USBC staff would put in your board members into the community, and then your community administrators would still manage the tools within. If you had a forum or a file library, you would still have a community administrator who managed your own content. A third option would be if you're not wanting to use the community tools right now for either your open membership or for your board, a third option would be that you could just use it to manage the coalition leader roles. And in that case, your community administrator would just use the roster tool within it to maintain this data on who's your chair, who's your treasurer, who's your media contact, that kind of data communication. So, and then another caveat to this, if you wanted to do both, a membership community and a board community, that's also an option, and these would be set up as separate communities, one open, one restricted. Again, your community administrators would have access to manage both, but they would have to be separate. So we're also going to offer that option on the form that we have you fill out, letting us know your preferences, but it is possible to do that as well. So a few key FAQs, and then I will shush and turn it over to Amelia, who has much more to say, about tribal coalitions and local ones. We do have a default pre-go live national Native American community that's set up, so folks, if it's available, if folks would like to go and join it, they can. Other tribal coalitions are welcome and encouraged to request that communities be set up for them as well, and that will be available after the Go Live launch to the U.S. breastfeeding domain. So we'll have a process that we promote for that in March. And then local coalitions can also request to have a separate local forum, which is, again, a forum is like a listserv. Could also have a file library within their state's community. So that is also very possible and can happen within the state communities as well. And then the members of the state community could subscribe to that local tool. What about interstate networking? Of course, just as before, where we had our coalitions forum, where there's going to be a new area, a general coalitions learning connection with broad community access tools for sharing across all types of breastfeeding coalitions. So look for that. We hope that everybody that's part of a state coalition would obviously be part of this broader coalitions connection as well. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have these coalition roles, all these different types of leaders that you see here on the screen. These folks will have their own restricted communities for networking amongst, whether it's all the coalition chairs and presidents, people who are paid coalition staff, people who are advocacy contacts with breastfeeding coordinators will have ways to communicate and connect all those different types of people by leader roles. Big thing you see in red here, having this new system is going to take the place of the designated contributor system. We've had this 3 people per state as a default option for several years now because of the limitations of our old website system. So that is no more. Everybody who wants to will have a login to this, and then we'll use this much more sophisticated way of delineating different roles within your coalitions. So what to consider now? We're going to give you an online form tomorrow where every state coalition can specify your group admins. Again, these are the people who would update your group profile, your window display. You would also tell us your one poll contact, a person to receive your request for voting, and 1 to 3 community admins, and those again are the people to manage your place, your gathering place for your coalition. You're also going to be asked questions about how you want to use the community option, whether open for the membership, for just your board only, both of those, or we just don't want to use it right now, but we want to manage our coalition leader roles in there. That's also an option. And lastly, I'll just tell you a very little bit about the website launch timeline. Of course, we're doing an orientation demo right now. And then tomorrow we will send the designated contributors for all the state and territory coalitions the link to that online form I just mentioned. The individuals that identify as group admins on that form are then going to be set up with logins ASAP, and we'll have virtual curbside TA sessions, both live and recorded, next week for people who are group admins. The group admin folks for both our national member organizations and the state territory coalitions are going to be able to make pre-go live profile updates through the end of February. So again, this is not mandatory, but it is a courtesy option. If you'd like to go in and have your profile filled in before we go live, we encourage you to do so. And we'll have that pre-go live option through the end of February. And then we will go live on usbreastfeeding.org domain the first week of March. And so that's the point when other folks, whether individuals or other organizations, can set up their profiles. And that will also be the point where we really start moving into the community admin trainings. And we will offer those for coalitions on a rolling basis, because we really do, we know that you're not all going to be ready to dive into using community tools tomorrow. So we certainly recognize that folks will be thinking about this and need some time to decide how they want to use it right now, and that you might decide to use it differently in the future. And that's totally fine. So we'll have a rolling way to train new community administrators throughout the transition period as well as beyond. So I'm going to shush now and turn it over to Amelia here to talk to us next about the Constellation pathway. Hang on one second, Amelia. I'm just pulling up the slides, but go ahead and talk so that I can hear you.
Fabulous. Am I audible?
You are audible. Okay. Here is the slideshow.
Okay. And so I'm having some fun with technology and have lost internet connectivity at my house in the last 5 minutes. So I'm very glad that I'm connected by phone. And although, Megan, I can't see the slides that you're displaying, I can see the slides that were created, and we can work together.
Okay.
So go team. So hello, everyone. I'm really glad to be able to talk to you today about an exciting development that we've been working on with articulating, so and then what do we get? We have these really exciting ways that Megan has shown us how we can connect with one another on the new website, provided that you have internet. And then what are we going to do once we get there? So I wanted to share that with you. So on the first slide, we see about the group profiles. So as Megan explained, the coalition profile is going to include the action directory and the engagement levels. And the engagement levels are really important because they indicate to USBC how deeply your coalition has interest and readiness and capacity to engage in each of the topic areas. So next slide. We see for the engagement levels, the full definition for each engagement level is going to be included on the website. But to give you a little bit of orientation to that, if you select that you have a core level interest, your group has a core interest in a given topic, that likely means that you have a well-established program, you have partnerships, and you have funding in that area already. You're fully engaged in this work, you are on, and you're ready to go. If you indicate an involved level of engagement, then that means that you likely have programs and partnerships or funding in this area already, but not necessarily all three of them. So you're on all cylinders, you want to be involved, but not quite the same thing as being core. On the next slide, we see supportive. A supportive level engagement means that you may be minimally active in the area, but you're interested in staying up to date. You're going to share information and resources with networks and support advocacy initiatives of other partners, but it's probably not an area where you're going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting as an organization. And if you indicate peripheral interest, it means that you're not currently active in that area and you have a minimal level of interest. So you might care about it, but your group at this time at least is not ready and interested and poised to be an active heavy lifter on that particular topic. So next slide, looking at online learning communities. So learning communities are arranged by topic, as Megan showed us, and the really exciting thing is that they are open to everyone. And so everyone that creates an individual profile can then opt into a learning community that they care about. And when you get there, you can start or join a discussion that's on a forum. You can share materials. Megan was showing us a little bit about what it would look like once you go into a document that's been created, and you can do all those cool things with it. It's also just a great way we're going to be able to see more than we've ever seen before about what's happening at every level of this country. Whatever people want to share by topic area, it's going to be there now. And the emphasis in these learning communities, the point is to be connecting and learning with one another and to be building community through respectful discourse. So of course, we're going to come to this place and we're going to listen to one another, we're going to be kind to one another, we're going to lift each other up, and we're going to see what happens when we all come together. So you may have had the opportunity to download the Constellation Formation Pathway document. If you haven't, that's okay. You don't need to scramble and do that right now. You can do it afterwards. But I'm going to walk through it. And what the Constellation Formation Pathway gives us is a formulated understanding of how is it that organic groups can form and evolve to a place of being very, very clear about what they're doing and why and how they're measuring their success and how they're working together. But before we get to that level, we start in this really lovely space of the learning community. And as I said, in that space, we're there to connect and learn. So the description is it's a dynamic network of organizations that are coming together around a common interest. We provide, as infrastructure support for this, the learning community sections that are housed on the USBC website. The strategy, the point here is to share information and resources and surface opportunities for collaborative action. So I'm going to say that part again. Surface opportunities for collaborative action. We're going to revisit that in a moment. And then the engagement here is to intentionally build community through listening and learning. The next slide shows us that the key players of a learning community are local, state, and national organizations and individuals that are aligned by topic. Now, USBC has a number of roles in this space within the learning community. We will host these communities and support your utilization, so we will give it to you and help you with it. We will house and display organizational engagement and activity data on those the action pages that Megan showed us. We'll house a database of individual topic experts, and we'll be publishing e-news, blog, and social media. So I mentioned before, on the next slide, we see this is about surfacing the opportunities for collaborative action. So we have a progression here. We go from sharing information, and in that process, we believe that because we've observed many groups sharing information with one another, that what will emerge is identifying some gaps and opportunities. And then what often happens when we observe these groups and are part of these groups is that you get this charge of someone should do something. And to move to the place of from someone should do something to we are doing this, a couple things need to happen. We need to identify what is the lever for change, meaning what is the meaningful action that we can take together, and then also who needs to be at the table to get this done. How do we engage with the stakeholders and bring them together to become a collective body of a we that is then going to pursue accomplishing that particular goal. And USBC has a number of ways that we can support this progression. So on the next slide, as a recap, again, the strategic framework, the beauty of it is that the goal one, be the collective, national collective voice for breastfeeding. The impact here is that because all of you, everyone is in charge, the participants are in charge of what happens, what comes about, what needs to get done. But then under goal 3, engage stakeholders in the collective impact model, we've articulated how we can support that collaboration to occur. And I think it was Megan who recently said, this is the opportunity for USBC to be a backbone, not a bottleneck. So we can be a support and just hold a wide open space for the work that needs to get done. This is about empowering all of you. So on the next slide, we take a deeper look at goal 3. We have several different priorities here. 3.1 is to articulate and advance a national policy advocacy agenda. 3.2 is to build public will and mobilize funding to prioritize support for the work of the field. 3.3 is to convene stakeholders, guide strategy, and establish shared measurements to support aligned activities. 3.4 is to serve as the communication and networking hub for the field. And 3.5 is to support increased capacity and engagement of the Breastfeeding Coalition. because we love you. So you can see all of the different kinds of things that a coalition does is embedded into those 5 points. And between the website and the work that we're doing in articulating the Constellation Formation Pathway, we want to help all of you be able to do this collaborative work together. So on the next slide, the Constellation Model for Collaborative Social Change. Organizations come together in this model to form action-focused work teams. That's what a constellation is, an action-focused work team. And so what are the features of a constellation? Well, it gives us the opportunity to align partners that have the capacity to do the work. And what's really exciting here is that those partners can include organizations that are not USBC members. We're not limited in that way. So, for example, perhaps a workplace constellation that forms could benefit from a strategic partnership with the U.S. Department of Labor. They're not currently a USBC member, but definitely they're a stakeholder in that conversation. We could also see how a working breastfeeding mother would be a really great and important stakeholder to include. And within this model, we can have that kind of flexibility, and you can have that kind of flexibility to make sure that the table is big enough that you're bringing all of those important voices together. Another key component is a lightweight governance structure. So we'll be talking in a little bit about what kind of structure we believe does need to be there, so some of the anticipatory guidance that we've built around how to grow and be a functional group, but not so heavy and cumbersome that it becomes difficult to respond to the charge if someone should do something and to become the we will do this. Also, it allows us the chance to leverage resources, maintain flexibility, distribute leadership, and to also provide support through a third-party coordinating body, which is typically called a backbone organization. So on the next slide.
Amelia, if I can interrupt just for a second. I just want to let our audience, our participants know that we know that the 2 hours is up, but we will keep recording and going on with this. So if you have to leave, you may, but we will continue recording, and the recording will be up on the Coalition's webinar page today. Thank you. Go ahead, Amelia.
Thank you so much, Kintini, and I apologize. I meant to say that at the top, but in my scramble for the workaround, I forgot that bit. So thank you all for tuning in if you need to go, and thank you also if you stay on. So in Pathway Stage 1, where we think of this as the incubation conversation, and you heard Megan use this term a couple different times, but this is really a critical point where you see some energy that's building in the learning community or through other means, where a subset of organizations become interested in exploring collaborative action. It's that point of saying, you know, we think we want to do something. So the infrastructure support USBC can provide is the convening of those stakeholders. And we can help hold an incubation dialogue about what the issues are and what the context is, and help you all identify the levers for change and the available resources that might be used to make that change. Now, this incubation conversation might be facilitated directly by USBC, or it also might be that we support an outside party in doing that. But this stage of the process looks like that. So part of the engagement strategy here is to identify missing voices and perspectives. And this is a really critical component to making sure that we're thinking beyond the usual players. I think a lot of times in coalitions, we have, you know, healthcare providers that are the majority at the table. This model really invites us and even pushes us to go beyond that. On the next slide, for Pathway Stage 1 incubation conversation, we see the key players are the partner organizations that are aligned to act. So the USBC roles here include providing the web meeting systems, time and space at the USBC meetings, and support to move along the pathway to develop and become a formal constellation, if that's the will of the group. And then also to embed equity into the pathway with tools around strategy, practices, and engagement at every stage. So on the next slide, we see that the constellation model really seems to be a good fit for USBC, and we believe for the breastfeeding field at large. So it works very well for USBC because it allows us to build on our current meeting structure and also use our new web design to support our growth as a nimble and inclusive coalition. I really think this is going to be a structure that allows us to be much more responsive in real time as things come up. And we're not limited to an old style strategic plan that expires at a certain date, but instead can keep on going and growing as we need to. Meanwhile, Megan had mentioned that our Crash Equity Committee has worked on some recommendations, and our transformation team is working on implementing those, including looking at our membership policies. So this is, again, a model that allows USBC as an organization to hold the space for all of this great work while also growing and changing ourselves. So we can support incubation conversations for the field, either at our meetings or they can happen virtually. And we are collecting many tools and resources to facilitate the process of generating ideas and dialogue and really helping the field to be very strategic about how we move things forward. On the next slide. Our equity values are very important to us, and they are embedded throughout the Constellation Formation Pathway. To list up just a few examples, learning communities, by their very nature, you can hopefully see, are democratizing open forums. Everyone can come and have an individual forum and self-select into the learning communities to engage in intentional community building together. Stage 1 of the pathway includes the identification of missing voices and perspectives, as we talked about during that component of the incubation conversation. And in stage 2, we prioritize outreach so that we balance the group composition. So again, we get even more intentional about how we include people that aren't there. And we have a number of tools to look at racial structural problems and the race impact that might be part of the context of a given topic or activity. So in the next stage, a little bit more about the incubation conversation. They're structured to generate ideas and dialogue and to include the evaluation of missing voices. And because of that, they're just the beginning. So even if a small group of people, a subset of people has an incubation conversation, others can come as they find one another and join into the process. So there's a couple different things that can come out of these conversations. Either there's the decision that the time isn't right because there's not the right energy, or there's not the right capacity, or there's not the right funding. Something it's not time yet. So then the decision could be to remain as a learning community, and that's awesome. Or there could be a decision to progress along the pathway and formalize into a constellation, an action-focused work team. And this happens, and it's right to do that, when need, opportunity, energy, and capacity are all in alignment. So in the next slide, just making that visual for those of you like me who appreciate arrows. From the incubation conversation, you can either return to the learning community, or you can step into the next stage of become an emerging constellation. Someone described this as chutes and ladders, and indeed, except there's no winners and losers here. It's all good. So on the next stage, so learning communities are great, and just again, there is no pressure or imperative to form a constellation. A lot of things can be and will be accomplished through the learning communities. And then constellations are also great, if that's the way that your group goes. It allows for specific organizations to take on specific activities that are right for them. And in fact, we anticipate that several constellations could arise from a single learning community topic. What's right is that every organization finds the bit that's right for them. So you come to an incubation conversation when you're really excited about a particular activity, and you move along the pathway to formalize as a work team if that piece is right for you. So on the next slide, I'm going to move through these pretty quickly since you're going to be able to download this and look at it in more detail later. But Pathway Stage 2 is an emerging constellation. And this is where a group of partners from the incubation conversation have identified an initial steward or steward organization that want to form a constellation. So then they will proceed to have a conversation about the levers for change, so what they want to do, what their available resources are, and their shared understanding of the strategic direction that they need to go in. This is also the stage where they really think about how else to balance their group composition. And you can see on the next page, then on the next slide, that the ways that USBC supports the stewards and interested partners is providing technical assistance and tools on strategy and measurement and evaluation, and to support the outreach and orientation of new partners, and to facilitate the engagement of breastfeeding coalitions. In Pathway Stage 3, organizing constellation, this is about organizing for impact. So the emerging constellation is that in this stage is ready to negotiate our partnership agreement. So remember we talked earlier about the importance of a lightweight governance structure. We want something that's not cumbersome, but we also want to be really thoughtful about what is it that we know groups need in order to thrive. So as you can see on the bottom of the slide, the engagement here is that internally the group needs to make some decisions to define their decision-making process and their conflict management processes. And they also need to make some decisions about how to engage the community and build the public will. Now these ultimately are going to be written up and worked out with the group and also with the support of USBC as they decide to formally affiliate and receive backbone supports from USBC. And on the next slide, this is where USBC will be advocating for funding sources to support the work as it's emerging, to support the networking of media and advocacy contacts, to coordinate an advocacy agenda and media response, and to provide training and technical assistance and tools for advocacy, media, and fundraising action. So the next slide, the emerging constellations. So there's a benefit to going through this process. So even if it sounds a little heavy to think all those things through ahead of time, there's some real benefits to doing so. First of all, it limits scope creep. You don't have partners coming to the table and then having the work get way bigger than anyone wanted because you're defining some agreements in advance. You're saying what the common agenda and goals and strategies are. You're defining what expertise and assets you're willing to put on the table and also what you need to hold back. As I said, you're thinking through decision-making and conflict management strategies, your funding and equity approaches, the markers of success and the shared matrix for that success, and the backbone supports that you want from USBC. And this is a really important component of this terms of reference, as it's called, these partnership agreements, because there's clarity then between what the work group, the action team, wants from USBC and what USBC will provide. And that clarity is a benefit to everyone. Okay, on the next slide, we're in the purple realm here, the Pathway Stage 4. This is where we have a USBC affiliated constellation. So these are organized and formally affiliated constellations that are engaging in the action that meets the 5 conditions of collective impact. They have a negotiated and final terms of reference with USBC and with each other. It's articulating their working agreements. And their strategy is supporting the implementation of strategies and continuous alignment of the partners. They have continued external engagement, promotion, and/or advocacy of their activities. And on the next page, on the next slide, you can see USBC will be supporting the steward organizations, the USBC staff, and USBC Constellation Steering Committee will all be there in service to advance the final terms of reference that the given constellation has created, to help with the conflict resolution guidelines and the process for that. So there will be support that we're providing for that. And scanning the constellations for overall gaps and opportunities. And this, I think, is also one of the beautiful things about having a backbone organization in any field, is that from a bird's eye view, you can see where perhaps one constellation's work is maybe starting to look a lot like the others, and to make sure that in that case, they're talking with one another so that there's not duplication of work. Likewise, if there are gaps or opportunities that arise, I think USBC is going to be in a really nice position to look, using those engagement levels, be able to surface who could come together and respond to a need or opportunity in the field. Next slide. So USBC is in a position to serve as a steward in 3 topic areas. This is because we have funding, as Megan showed at the beginning, with the funding that we've received to hold space for continuity of care, workplace support, and lactation support providers. On the next slide, you can see USBC more often will be serving in the role of a convener. So we're here to engage the stakeholders, that means all of you, in the collective impact model. So our website's a key mechanism for us to do this, and I hope you take the time to look at our implementation plan and see all the other many ways that we will be engaging and supporting all of you. But again, your individual and your group profiles are the entry point. So I'm excited to see what gets populated as you all get your log on. And from that, wherever the energy and momentum and the capacity align, USBC can support an incubation conversation, and where there's an emerging steward or lead organization, they can support the development of a constellation if that's the will of that group. So in the next slide, here's a list of some of the incubation conversations that we held in person at our January USBC meeting. And as I said earlier, incubation conversations are just the beginning. So if one of these topics is of interest to you, there are ways to join in. The next slide, here's the second half of the list of what we did in January. And the slide after that shows some of the other pilot conversations that we've convened in past USBC meetings. And this obviously is by no way a finite list of the conversations that will be coming in the future. We look forward to that. So you can see USBC is really in a sweet spot here. We have 3 different guiding documents. We have a strategic framework, and with the goal 3 that describes the kind of supports that we can give to the field. Then we have our implementation plan that we hope that you will download. It explains and describes more about what USBC will do and what the outputs will be of our efforts. And then the Constellation Formation Pathway that we've just gone over right now describes the processes and mechanisms whereby organizations can form USBC-affiliated constellations. And these 3 build on one another, and the website will facilitate and support it all. So in conclusion, key takeaway points, I hope, is that we've come a long way on this journey together to get to this point where we have this clarity and articulation about how we hold the space for the work of the field and what we want to offer all of you. And just the way that we've journeyed to this point together, taking your input along the way, we will continue to improve and to grow and to clarify all of these possibilities. I think collectively we're all going to get better at this as we go along. We really are inventing something in many ways. This hasn't been done on this scale before, which is really exciting. And I think together we're going to find the right places and the ways that we can meaningfully connect to sustain the priority actions and have a collective impact all together. So I appreciate you tuning in or checking out the recording of this webinar. And Megan, I'm not sure if you have any other announcements.
I think Kinkini is asking if we can do some questions. We haven't lost very many people, so if folks are still on and would like to ask some questions, I think we could take 5 or 10 minutes to do that. And thank you if you have stayed on. We appreciate your long patience with us and the many updates that we have. So Kinkini, do you have any questions you'd like to highlight?
Sure. I think folks are lots of comments about being excited about the potential of this website and wanting to know what kind of TA will be offered. It seems, what kind of help will be offered. to help coalitions set up their group profiles?
Sure. So we're going to have two different types of training or TA that is provided. We'll be doing the profile training immediately, in the next couple of weeks, because again, we will be having the national member organizations and the state coalition folks in there able to update their profiles before we go live in March. So that opportunity will be immediate, and we'll be doing we'll do a recorded version of it as well, and then we'll also offer both some evening and daytime time slots for that. I envision that profile training will be more brief, probably a half an hour type of training, and it will be just focused on, first of all, doing your individual profile and then your group. So that comes first. The community administrator training will be different, and will come in March, and will possibly be some slightly different groups of folks. And again, because we're offering the different variations in how you can choose to use your community, we might also, depending on your responses to the form, we might group it so that those of you who are saying that you'd like to right off the bat have your community be open to the whole membership, or have your community be just for your board, we might want to group you so that it is a little bit more focused on the way in which you're choosing to use your community. So I think we're going to see what the responses are to those survey questions first before we announce the exact way that we'll do those. But the community administrator training will be more in-depth because, of course, there's a lot more options available within a community. There's a lot more meat to that. So I would expect those would be a 60 to 90-minute training. And again, we'll offer both evening and daytime slots, and probably we'll have an initial grouping of them for folks who are ready to get going right away. But as I said, I think that will really need to be a rolling offering, where if later down the line in 6 months your coalition decides to change its listserv that you're using and you want to move into the USBC system, that's totally fine, and we'll have rolling regular community administrator trainings that we offer. But I would just expect we'll do more in March, because that will be the initial transition period. So I hope that helps. I don't want to say exactly every detail, because, again, we want to give you guys flexibility to tell us what you need on this survey.
Thank you, Megan. Lots of questions about the training, so I'm glad you addressed that. We have time for one last question, and that is the community section going to replace a coalition's website and Facebook pages? Will we have to, so I think there are two questions about whether the USBC community page will in any way replace.
The communities are not intended to replace your website or Facebook page. They certainly do have some aligned functionality, and so it could be that it is possible that a coalition could choose to have a public website that is housed on this platform. But a community is by definition a private space. So in order to get into your coalition community, somebody's going to have to log in. So that's just a caveat there. It is possible, and I know we've talked with a couple of states that either don't currently have a website of their own, or aren't happy with the current option that they're using, about the possibility of piloting using this system for your coalition's public webpage. Again, that is possible, but it's not what we've initially set up here. The one thing that I would say that is possibly a deal breaker for folks about that option, and certainly, again, it's something we're looking at and we'd like to try to pilot for a couple of states for those who are interested. But if you do that, if you use the USBC system as your public web page, the domain can't be changed. The domain, it has to be usbreastfeeding.org, and so then it could be usbreastfeeding.org/Idaho, to use my earlier example. And you could certainly also go, if you have an existing domain that's idahobreastfeeds.org or whatever it is, you could redirect that to go to the website pages within USBC's system. but you don't have the same freedom that you would if you were housing and hosting your own public website on your own domain. So that's, I would just say that caveat. We're certainly willing and interested in trying that out for groups that's a right decision for, but it may not be something that you would want to do because of that domain reason.
Great. Thank you, Megan. And there are a lot of questions that are very specific, and I'm going to answer each one of you individually, but these were the two main things about the community page and also about the TA and help, because it does, as we rush through this, it can seem a little complicated. It's less complicated than it looks. So, yeah. All right, well, that brings us to the end of today's session, and thank you very much for sticking with us. We hope very much that you will utilize the potential of the website to make your presence known and to join and build your own communities for coordinated action. Breastfeeding coalitions are powerful vehicles mobilizing action to strengthen the foundation of support system and clear barriers. So thanks for all you do to improve the lives of women, children, and families. The slides and the video recording will be up on the website on the Bi-Monthly Coalition's webinar page by this evening. Goodbye for now, and I look forward to having you all for our next webinar session. Thank you.